So let's say you're a Linux user, and maybe you even use Arch, by the way. Let's say you also just installed i3WM and you are loving it. You're flipping through your panes, your workspaces, you love the flow, but your configuration looks like crap. And here's the thing, no one's gonna respect you if your i3 config looks like crap. Trust me, my wife and kids didn't respect me at all until I made my i3 look like this. It is gorgeous. I love it. The colors are nice, the fonts are nice, it's beautiful. And you know what? You deserve respect. So in this video, I'm gonna share how I like to make my i3 config look and feel nice. This is us ricing our i3 config. Let's get into it. So before we get into this video, I just want to talk really quickly about what this video is and what this video isn't. You see, ricing is the process of making your Linux configuration look and feel better. That's the basic definition. But to me, ricing is a lot simpler. You see, I like the minimalistic approach. That's partly why I like i3WM to begin with. So for me, what I would consider ricing is really just installing the programs that give me my best developer experience day to day, and maybe configuring just a couple of colors and fonts to make it look a little bit nicer. If you want some really great inspiration, then check out Reddit's Unix porn subreddit. They have awesome examples of excellent configurations where they take things to the limit of ricing. Seriously, it's crazy. But for me, I just like to install the programs that I like to use on a day-to-day basis, and like I said, configure a couple of things to make them look nice and be done with it. And in this video, you'll note that I have all of my configurations in GNU Stow. So in this video, we're going to install all the programs that I think are essential and a great developer workflow, and then I'm going to give you a tour of the dot files for each one of these configurations. Now, I could write these dot files out myself in this video, but I don't want to spend 3 hours making a video where I just tweak some fonts and colors. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so here we are with our base i3 configuration. You might know this from our previous video in this series. The series, by the way, is called Linux for Noobs. We installed i3 and I went over just a couple little tips and tricks of how to use it. But now in this video, we're going to configure it to look amazing. And obviously our stock configuration looks like crap. Also, the resolution is a little bit low because this is a virtual machine. Don't worry about that. Now, the first thing you might be asking yourself is, where are the configs? Well, if we type mod return, we will open up our terminal and we can see our configuration for i3 is in the .config folder, i3/config. This is our configuration for i3. It controls everything in i3. And you can see here we have some configurations here that we can change, but for now, let's just up our fonts a little bit. Our font is the thing that i3 displays on the titles and a few other places. So let's change this to 14. Now we can refresh our i3 config, which is one of the best things that i3 actually gives you out of the box. I think it's amazing. It's Mod Shift R. Mod Shift R will refresh our configuration and we can see now that we have bigger fonts. Fantastic. Okay, so now that we've been acquainted at least a little bit with our i3 configuration, I want to go over the first thing that I think is essential to install, which is an AUR helper. Now this is obviously an Arch related thing and not necessarily an i3 related thing, but if you're following along and you've used Arch, this is essential. So you might be asking yourself, what is the AUR? Well, the AUR is essentially a community-driven third-party package repository for Arch. Anything that isn't in the main Arch repository that you can install via Pacman is in the AUR, and the AUR is awesome. It's a very mature and well-run community, and people are making amazing packages for all kinds of programs that you could want. The AUR is also huge. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to install something in Ubuntu, haven't found it, and it's clearly in the AUR. Easy to use, easy to install. It's awesome. But the AUR's packages aren't as easy to install as Pacman packages from the official repository. However, the community has helpers for the AUR. So if we look up some helpers, AUR helpers, we can see there's a lot here in the Arch wiki. Some of these might be a little bit out of date, but I can just tell you right now, my favorite are two. There is Yay, which is a well-supported and maintained package helper, and there's another one called Paru. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But either way, Yay and Paru will get you what you want. Paru, I think, is a little bit newer, and I think it's going to be more maintained moving forward. I'm not sure. There's a little bit of vagueness around that, but Yay seems to be actively maintained, has a lot of stars, and so I've been using Yay. I like it. I have no complaints. So let's install Yay so we can easily install the Arch user repository packages, some of which we're going to use in this tutorial. Now we just need to go back to our VM. Here we are. Ew, looks like crap. No big deal. We'll get into this. So in our VM, we could just open up Firefox right here. We do this with mod D, which is our D menu command, Firefox, and we can type Yay package manager. And from here, we can follow the instructions to install Yay. And in this repo, we actually make sure Git is installed. So let's install Git. Of course, I need to do this in sudo. And there we go, Git's already installed. Great. Then we're gonna wanna clone our repository into our computer. There we go, awesome. And we wanna CD into the new repository we just cloned. Now we wanna run make package -si. Now this is a command that you would use for all Arch user repository packages. So you can see there's multiple steps whenever you want to install an AUR package, but Yay is gonna make this seamless. It's gonna act just like Pac-Man. It's awesome. Now we run make package to actually make the package based on a specific file that's in this repository. It will install everything that's needed and we'll be good to go. Okay, great. So Yay is installed. Now what do we do? Well, we just use Yay the way we would Pac-Man. So it's the same command, but you replace Pac-Man with Yay. That's it. It's perfect. So let's install a package here. I want to install nerdfonts because I want to use a nice nerd font that I use on all my configurations in this configuration. So let's look at nerdfonts, Meslo, AUR. And this is it, TTF Meslo Nerd. So we can type Yay -s, just like Pac-Man, TTF Meslo Nerd. Yes, proceed with installation. Make my font bigger here too, why not? So now let's make the font of our i3 configuration a little bit better. We can type FC list now to list out all of our fonts. And let's actually pipe that to grep for Meslo. Okay, great. So I think what we want to use here is Meslo LGM Nerd Font. So we can go into our i3 config and change our font to Meslo LGM Nerd Font. Now Pango is the library that i3 ships with to render text. So that's why you see Pango here. You don't change Pango. Now we go into here and we type Meslo LGM Nerd Font 14. And now we refresh our system and yes, it looks like our font is now Meslo LGM Nerd Font. Very cool. That's how you configure the font for your system as a whole. Awesome. Now with Linux in general, there's always something new to learn, and I think that's a fantastic thing about Linux. While it can be frustrating at times striving for that like perfect setup that you're going to use forever, we know as developers there is no such thing. That's why today's sponsor, Brilliant.org, is perfect for those lifelong learners. Whether you're just starting out in software development or you're a seasoned principal engineer or something like that. Now, if you've been following this channel, you know that we're not about spoon feeding or hand waving. We want people to grasp the core concepts. This way, whether a new NeoVim plugin is released or we're diving into a new tiling window manager, you'll be able to dive in, read the manual, and understand it seamlessly. Brilliant calls this a first principles approach. And spoiler, I'm a fan because that's exactly what we do here at this channel. With Brilliant, you can explore fundamental computer science topics like conditionals or delve deep into advanced subjects like LLMs. So check them out and get a 20% off your annual membership after a free 30-day trial. The link is brilliant.org/typecraft. We'll link it down below as well. So check them out. Really, they're awesome. Now let's get back to configuring our i3. It's gonna look great, I promise. Now the next thing that typically happens in an i3 configuration is you would have a lot of screen tearing, or at least things would look a little bit janky. If I go to my second workspace here and launch Firefox, if I go back and forth between these two, I get a little bit of screen tearing here. And why does that happen? Well, it's because i3 doesn't ship with a composite manager, and we want to install one. So we want to install picom. Picom is a lightweight compositor for X11. It's a fork of Compton. If you're familiar with Compton from back in the day, picom is a fork of Compton, which is also a fork of Xcomp Manager Dana, which is a fork of another composite manager. It's a long list. But what we have here is a compositor, which will actually handle drawing the GUI on the screen in our Linux environment. It'll also do other things like handling transparency, fading things in and out, things like that. You want a composite manager. So let's install picom. We can do that with Yay. Yay, install picom. And yes, we want to proceed with the installation. Now here is where I want to use GNU Stow. Now I have dot files in my GitHub repository and typecraft dot files. And from here, I can clone the dot files locally, just like this. Now the next thing I want to do to actually get my dot files for picom is make sure I have GNU Stow installed. So I want to install Stow. Now what GNU Stow does, and I'm just going to cover it very lightly, is it handles symlinking your dot files to the directories they're supposed to go in. So if I'm in my dot files directory, the repo that I just cloned, I can type stow picom. And what that will do is it will move the picom.files from this stowed directory to a symlink on my computer. So now my dot files will pick up picom. I can check this by cding into config and doing ls-latr, which will show me the symlinks, and I can grep for picom. And sure enough, picom is here. It is symlinked to dot files picom.config/picom. Now, if I look at my picom config, I have just a couple of settings here. Some stuff with GLX. I use a Ryzen motherboard here, so I think these are very necessary for that. And that's about it. We want to just have a simple configuration here. Hey guys, Future Typecraft here. I just wanted to clarify something really quick. After we install picom, what you want to do is actually execute the picom binary by putting it in your i3 configuration file. It looks like this, line 17. You want to execute picom with no startup ID. I'm going to explain what execute no startup ID means in about 5 minutes or so. But like I said, we lost this footage and I just want to put it in here really quick. You want to execute picom when i3 starts up. You do that by putting it in your i3 config right here before everything else. Okay, cool, see ya. And if we refresh our configuration, we can go back and forth and we can see that there's no more screen tearing and picom is doing its job. Nice, right? Now it might not be a big change now, but if you want to add things like transparency or fading stuff in and out, you do this in the picom config that I just showed you. By the way, now that we've cloned my dot files repository, I'm using alacritty in this setup right now, and I want to make it look nice. So I can cd into my dot files directory and stow my alacritty config. Now if I go to my config directory, I can check for alacritty and cd into that repository and cd into that directory. And let me just show off how I like to configure alacritty to, rice it. It's really cool. I can open up my alacritty.toml file and just show that I want some terminal things, but also I want Meslo, nerdfont mono. I want it to be bold. I set up my fonts here, and I also import something, which is a catppuccin mocha file. So I have my colors and everything else set up for alacritty. So if I quit alacritty and reopen it, it should be configured. The font might be wrong though, so let's see. Nope, that looks pretty good actually. The font looks good. The color scheme looks good. I think we have a good alacritty setup. Awesome. And again, this is in .config/alacritty. And within this, we can go to our alacritty.toml file and note that we have Meslo LGS nerd font at size 14 set to our font. And we also have the special catppuccin mocha color scheme stuff. That's why the background changed ever so slightly. Now, the next thing that I like to set up is a nice status bar at the bottom here. Now, this one is okay. It looks fine, but the default i3 status bar just isn't that great. So I like to install a status bar called polybar. Now, polybar is a simple, lightweight status bar sort of tool and package and all this stuff. There's a lot of really great built-in features and it's really easy to set up. So if you want, you can check out Polybar's repository and check out all the documentation to get it set up for your machine the way you like it. Now, I of course already have my own configuration. So let's install Polybar and show off what we got. Proceed with installation, yes. And there we go, now we have Polybar installed. Now in my dot files configuration, I also have a Polybar config stowed here. So I wanna type stow polybar. So now I can go to .config/polybar and I can see that I have two configuration files here, config.ini and launchpolybar.sh. I'll talk about that script in a second, but config.ini, this is Polybar's configuration. Now this is why I kind of wanted to just show you guys my dot files and not actually configure them in this video, because we're just setting colors here. This is it. We just set colors. This is a catppuccin color scheme for Polybar and that's it. The rest of this is fairly stock for polybar. There's nothing too crazy here. There's some syntax with INI files that's like kind of hard to follow, but here I call my bar TOF. This is the general bar section. And we just set a few different things here. It's mostly setting nerd fonts and setting some colors, and that's just about it. It's pretty straightforward. The default configuration is great. I love it. So to see what our polybar looks like now, we can really just type polybar. That'll run the actual polybar. And look at that. It actually looks really cool already. The font's a little bit big. I'm going to change that, but that's kind of it. Pretty neat. So let's edit our configuration here for polybar, and let's change our font to something that isn't quite so large, maybe 14. Now let's run polybar in a separate section here and see what that looks like. Yes, that's much better. Okay, so let's quit polybar here, exit this terminal. You can see how moving around the i3 is just amazing. Now let's open up our i3 configuration, and somewhere in our configuration we want to execute with no startup ID polybar. And that's it. That's how you run polybar. Now, if we run this, we see that it actually doesn't work because we're just running exec. Exec will not run if you're refreshing your configuration. So actually, we probably want to use exec always, which is the command you would want if you want to run it every single time, even when you just refresh your configuration. No startup ID is an option. That means it will not wait for a window to load on startup. It'll just run this application. And that's kind of what we want with polybar. So now let's refresh, and hey, now we have polybar running in i3 config. So how do we get rid of this other bar here? We don't want this crappy bar. Well, to be honest, I actually kind of forget what it's called, but let me just look for it really quick. It's, I believe, the i3 status bar, but let me just look really quick. And yes, right here, we see it mentions start i3 bar to display a workspace bar. We can just comment out or delete this section, and we save our configuration, hit refresh, and sure enough, now we have polybar. But wait, we have two polybars running now. What happened? Well, what happened is when we refreshed our configuration, we didn't actually kill any of the previous polybars. So what we want to do is somewhere around where we initialize polybar above it, because this works from top to bottom here, we want to exec always kill all polybar. That will kill all instances of polybar and then run a new instance of polybar. And again, we probably want no startup ID. There we go. Now we hit refresh and there it is. Took a few tries, got me a little nervous there, but when we kept hitting refresh, so we have a little bit of a race condition here, but that's okay because in my configuration for polybar, I actually have a launch script for polybar. This is actually part of an answer to a GitHub question in the polybar repository. Somebody asked how we can make polybar appear on every single monitor in his setup, and this is how you would do it. Now, this also solves the race condition that we just saw. So instead, if we go back to our i3 config, so instead what we want to do here is actually run our polybar script. This fixes that race condition and also will make sure this polybar shows up on every monitor in our setup if we have multiple monitors. And this is also good to know that we can execute any random script within our i3 configuration. It's good to know for the future. So we want to execute config polybar launch polybar.sh. There we go. Now if we hit refresh, now everything looks great. Okay, awesome. So now we have polybar configured to look amazing and to run on every monitor in our setup. Beautiful. Let's keep going. Okay, so now some things are looking really great, but if we exit our terminal, our screen is just black. We just want a cool background to really tie this together. I have a great tool for it. It's called Feh, or Feh? I don't know, FEH. Feh is a lightweight image viewer aimed mainly at users of command line interfaces like us. We're Arch users, by the way. So we want to use Feh to show some images, and we can use i3 config to run Feh when our i3 launches, so we can show a nice image. Now, if you guessed it, I already have a nice background I want to use in my dot files that's in Stow. So let's open up our configuration here. We can go to dot files and list out the resources in here, and if we seed into backgrounds, we can see that I have a nice blue background. What is that? Well, let's install Feh. Yes, Feh is now installed. So if we type Feh Nice blue background. There we go. We have a beautiful blue background. So what we want to do is stow our backgrounds package out, and that will put it into, I believe, our base config directory. If I can spell correctly. So that didn't work. Is it in backgrounds here? Oh, I see. I incorrectly managed this in stow. No big deal. I'll fix this in the future so that this .files repository will be correct, but no worries, we can use this. So let's manage our configuration i3 config, and somewhere around where we start polybar, we also want to always run the fay command with one option, bg scale, and we want to pass it the nice blue background.png image. Now, normally this would be in our config subdirectory, but for now we're just going to use this. We're just going to run with it. Now, if we refresh our configuration and we exit our terminal, we see this nice, beautiful blue background. Things are really coming together here. I'm loving it. So now there's one more major thing that we want to rice in this configuration, something that's really been bugging me. Anytime I open a program, I want to hit Mod D. D will open up a program called D menu. D menu will list out things that are available to run within our Arch Linux installation. But D menu looks like crap. And once again, we want to be respectable individuals, so we want something better than D menu. Let's install Rofi. Rofi is a window switcher, a run dialog, SSH launcher, and dmenu replacement. It started as a simple clone of another program, but it's way better than dmenu, so let's install that. Wow, look at that nice blue background, by the way. Pretty nice. So let's open up our terminal and install Rofi. Now, Rofi is amazing. Just to test it out, we can run Rofi, and we can see here that Rofi is already easily able to run. We just type Rofi-show. Okay, so Rofi-show will do what? Well, it'll show kind of everything. This shows the windows right now. If we hit Control Tab, it tabs between the different things we can do. Drun, run something, SSH, show our windows. We can switch between Alacritty or Firefox. We can run stuff already. Rofi is awesome, but we want to configure this to be a little bit better than just awesome. We want it to be amazing. So I don't know if you've caught on yet, but in my .files configuration, I have a Rofi entry. So I will stow out our Rofi package, and let's go check out Rofi. Now in our Rofi directory, we can check out our configuration file. And our configuration file is actually fairly simple. We want to show the certain modes that we want to run, and we want to configure some of the displays like display combi, run, window. These are all the different types of displays you can use in Rofi. Check out the documentation if you're more interested in that. And our theme is catppuccin mocha, and it picks it up from this catppuccin mocha.rasy file. This is really nice. Again, Catppuccin is the best color scheme ever. And there is a Rofi port for Catppuccin. So it's super simple. You just download that rasy file and you import it into your Rofi configuration. And now you have all the great Catppuccin colors. It's amazing. So now if we type Rofi-show, let's see what we get here. Oh yeah, Rofi's looking really good. I'm loving this. So now in our i3 configuration, we can go ahead and bind a key to start Rofi instead of dmenu. Now up here, I could just type bind sim, and I want it to be mod plus space. Now space is special for me. I'm used to Spotlight and Mac OS, so for me, mod space is what I would always use to switch between my Windows and Mac OS. It's just something I'm used to. You can make this mod D to be a complete dmenu replacement, or you can use different key bindings to toggle different Rofi modes. Check out the documentation, it's pretty straightforward. Now for mod space, we want to exec Rofi, and we want to show our combined mode. Now our combined mode, we just saw in our Rofi configuration, display combi will show something called all. This will be all your windows, the ability to run a new command, and the ability to switch between things. Again, check out the documentation for Rofi. But if we write this file and then refresh our configuration, we have an error in our i3 config file. What? Show errors. There's a duplicate key binding. See, this is where i3 makes things easy for you. Now mod space has a duplicate key binding. Let's see where the other one is. changes between tiling and floating windows. I am going to uncomment that because for me, I don't care about tiling and toggling between floating and tiling mode, whatever. I'm gonna stay in tiling mode. But if I want that configuration back, I can always just bind it to a different key. No big deal. Now let's refresh again. No more error. Mod space will open up Rofi. Now the greatest part is I can just start typing Firefox and it'll flip me over to Firefox. I can type alacritty right over to alacritty. Or if I just want to run a whole new program, I can just type, let's say Firefox, and just go down to run Firefox. That'll open a new Firefox window for me, even though one was already open over here on Workspace 2. Rofi is amazing. It looks great, has great functionality. Seriously, download it and configure it. It's great. Okay, so things are looking really good. Now, there's just a couple more things I want to show you that's in my config that I think would be very helpful in your config. So let's open up our i3 configuration and check them out. Now, the first one is, I think, very essential. You want to have the ability to switch your windows in a tiling window manager to be the Vim keys. So HJKL is left, down, up, right, or ladder for short. Ladder. And what this allows you to do is, let's say you have a pane open right here. You can easily move back and forth between your windows with HJK and L, which makes things super easy and very, very, very straightforward if you love Vim key bindings the way I do. It's awesome. This is something you definitely need. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but the colors in my i3 configuration changed ever so slightly. And that's because in our i3 config, I added these colors. And again, this is why I'm not doing this in this video. It would be so freaking boring. I added the colors from the catppuccin theme to my i3 configuration, and then I edited this little table down here that tells i3 what colors to use in certain situations. So essentially we're using more purples, more things that look like catppuccin, and everything is just kind of tied together nicely. And so that's essentially it. With just a few packages and some configuration, we can have the most amazing i3 setup that you could ever hope for. We have all the colors, we have a nice beautiful background, we also have a way to show different backgrounds if we want, we have all the programs installed that we need, we have an AUR helper, we have all kinds of stuff. This should set you down the right track for your i3 configuration. Mess with this all you want. This is part of the fun. But for me, this is my config that I actually run on my machine right now. Like I said, these are my dot files that are in this dot file repository, again, linked below. So check that out, and hey, thanks nerds.